Hello, Erica.
Hi, Mary Lou. You sound great.
Oh, you're letting me show my
I'm doing it right away.
Great.
What's the time period on this one? 4.
Good afternoon. This is Marcy, Spanish interpreter. Claudia is telling me that she still hasn't been allowed in. Just letting you know, apparently she's waiting.
Claudia, could you please raise your hand if you're in the audience at this point?
I do not see the icon for interpretation at the bottom of the screen. St. Helena community, if you can hold for just one moment. This is Dr. Wilson. We're just wrapping up a few technical issues. We just came from our TK5 meeting, and so we'll be with you in just one moment. And Erica, you'll let us know when we're ready to start, and we are live.
Interpreters, are we ready to begin? Fantastic, thank you, thank you. Dr. Wilson, you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, St. Helena community, parents of students in grades 6 through 12. I am Mary Lou Wilson, the superintendent, and I'm going to ask Erica to describe the interpretation translation option before we continue. Erica, Ms. Madrigal.
Good afternoon. If you are joining us via Zoom this afternoon and you are in need of Spanish interpretation, we're very fortunate to have two excellent interpreters on this Zoom call. Claudia and Marcy will be alternating Spanish interpretation for our guests today. Please hover towards the bottom of your screen. When you see this globe icon right here, you will go ahead and click on interpretation and select Spanish. You will then hear their voices elevated over our staff voices. And if you need to click that off, you can also go ahead and go back to English. So thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Marcy, for being here with us.
Yes, thank you, Marcy and Claudia. I also wanted to introduce staff members that will be presenting today. Mr. Christopher Heller, our Chief Academic Human Resource Officer, is here with us. Chris.
Good afternoon.
Mary Allen, our Director of Instructional Support Services. Mary.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And Andy Stubbs, our Chief Business Officer. Would you like to say hello?
Good afternoon. Hi, everybody.
And a huge thank you to Erica Madrigal. She is executive assistant to myself and the governing board, and she will be facilitating and moderating questions and answers today. We also have in the very deep background, Derek Machado, our tech person who is helping us to ensure that we are here and you are hearing us. I'm at this time going to share my screen so that we have a bit of information we want to share with you, and then we will get to questions and answers. If you just give me one moment, there we go. I do want to confirm with all of you and help you to understand that it is the goal of our district, our governing board, myself, it is in my core that we want our students in person 5 days a week. We know that currently the governor's orders do not allow that. And as soon as they do, we will move forward to have students in person 5 days a week. So please know that is our ultimate and timely goal. Today, we're going to talk about the phased framework, share with you the schedules and program models for 6 through 12, and then truly take some time to address your questions, your concerns, and any thoughts that you might have. Few updates for you with regards to what's happening in our county, state, and nation. I think all of you are aware that infection rates continue to be increasing. We have reverted to more shelter-at-home restrictions even before Governor Newsom placed us on the state monitoring list, which requires that we provide instruction in a distance learning model. We must be off of that list for a consecutive 14 days. In order to move to in-person. And as we consider that in-person, that third bullet there shows you that we do have guidance from the Napa County Office of Education and the Public Health Office here in the county to support us in our move to in-person. We've been spending lots of time this summer preparing for in-person. Lots of work has been accomplished already. As a reminder, we are currently in phase 1, which is that required distance learning. And we have 2 options: distance learning for students who plan to join us in person as soon as possible, and then the virtual learning program for students who choose that remote learning for the entire school year. Phase 2 and phase 3 take us to more in-person, while we also will continue to offer the virtual learning program for the year for those families who are uncomfortable during a pandemic to have students in school. This organizing principle for age group transmission shows a continuum. And so 6 through 12 is on that far right side, where the organizing principles are all around physical distancing and face coverings. Both of those would be required as we move into in-person, physical distancing in classrooms as well as outside, face coverings all throughout the school day. Mr. Heller is going to take over the microphone now and talk to you about the different instructional deliveries. And please know all of these models are posted on the district website as well.
Correct. Yeah, these models and the different school day options are on the website and accessible to the community, so you can access all the slides that I'm going to present after this. On the first slide, going back, is there were 3 different phases of instruction that were approved at the governing board meeting in July in concept. So we do have these to review today. As you can see, what we're required to be in at this time is the full distance learning model that would have our school facilities not accessible for students, and they would be required to learn from home via a laptop or electronic device. Potentially, as we begin to return back to school, we may use the hybrid model, which our community responded to favorably in a survey, to have in-person instruction with half of the class 2 days a week in an A-B setting, and I'll talk more about that in the model. That was responded to by parents as the most favorable model in beginning to return to school. And then the last one would be daily school instruction. keeping in mind physical distancing and other safety concerns that we would need to conduct to have in-person school return to as normal as we can be during this time as we get back into daily school instruction. So on the next slide, Mary Allen, our Director of Curriculum Instruction, will present a little of the options that parents will consider to select between our beginning online person option 1, which was an intent to return to school, and then the full year virtual learning option, option number 2. So I'll let Mary talk about that before I talk about the actual schedules associated with option 1. So Mary?
Thank you, Mr. Heller. And that's the intent of the meeting today, as Dr. Wilson was stating, is that so you can get a clearer picture of option 1 and option 2 so you can make a choice. It is not easy to make a choice right now, and we certainly understand that, and there's no easy answer. And you know your child best, so we want to give you as much information as possible to make somewhat of an informed choice on your side. So option 1 would be that you are selecting to stay with the phased approach in our district, and TK through 5 would be assigned to small class cohorts for the year, and 6 through 12 would have the block schedules of 4 periods per day. And the reason we're doing the block schedule is because we want to limit the transitions from class to class, so we're extending the class periods. So we have less time of students mingling in the hallways and around each other. And then for the virtual learning option, which will be an option for you to choose, option number 2, we know some families are not comfortable having their son or daughter back in school during the pandemic. We completely understand that. So TK through 5, there would be 4 courses offered, English, Language Arts, and ELD, Math, Science, and Social Studies. For 6th through 8th grade, you'd add 5 classes that would be offered in the virtual learning option. That would be your 4 core classes as described above, and then foreign language, Spanish or French. And 9th through 12th grade, there would be 6 classes, and they would be determined with the high school counselors and staff to see what the needs are in reference to credits. This would be a full year option, and we will talk more about that as we move on in this presentation. But our intent right now is to give you as much information and answer your questions so you feel comfortable making a decision. Mr. Heller?
Thank you. So in developing our distance learning schedule, as Mary alluded to, the idea, the concept of a block schedule was very appealing. And so, keeping in mind a parent survey that provided some feedback to us about how much time they would want their students to be online in a school day, looking at a laptop and thinking about how much time a teacher might need to instruct the content that they need to do and provide some group work and some activities within that time. We landed on about 40 minutes of instruction in a 7-period day, as you can see illustrated here. That also gives students some at-home study time, and also in the afternoon provides what is called access, where teachers are available or will schedule time for students to get individual help as needed. So most of the daily instruction would occur prior to lunch, which you can see is at 11:55 each day. And then there's opportunities in the afternoon for students to continue their work or to connect with teachers. The board did approve 2 different models within the distance learning, and in all of our schedules that you'll see is the concept of adding an additional 8th period. And so what that 8th period would do is create flexibility within our master schedule to try to reduce class sizes within the day. Students would not add an additional period at this time, but the class periods might be extended by an additional period within the scheduled day to allow flexibility for teachers to spread students out throughout the day a little bit more, thus reducing the class size and creating that physical distancing that we want to have when we are able to return to school. So the next slide shows where on Tuesdays and Fridays, where there was an access period scheduled, that would potentially be encumbered by the period 8. And so also on Wednesday, you could see that there's access built into that school day as well with some at-home study time. So teachers would be teaching Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then available for additional student work and scheduling students on the Wednesday as listed. So that's the distance learning schedule. The hybrid model, based on a parent feedback and parent survey with multiple options, of either having a half day or half in the morning and half day in the afternoon, or what we'll take a look at here in a second of 2 days in person, or a week on, week off model where Group A comes in 1 week and Group B comes in the subsequent week. The survey responses indicated overwhelmingly that parents and students would choose Group A and B to be in person 2 days a week. So they would be in school on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday would have that distance learning model feel, and then Thursday and Friday would be Group B in person. So it would take your regular class size and split it in half, and you could see the schedule right here in the hybrid schedule, what that would look like. If I'm in Group A, for example, on Monday and Tuesday, I would attend all 7 periods, potentially access, and then you see in the afternoon, Group B would be required to check in with their instructors during that time in the afternoon to check in not only for attendance purposes, but any additional assistance that they might need prior to the at-home study time. So that would be the hybrid schedule. And I do want to alert the community that with our class sizes as small as they are, we're very blessed and fortunate in that aspect that we would be able to potentially go from distance learning, hopefully maybe using the hybrid as a very brief interim to connecting us to being back into full school instruction as soon as possible, because our goal, as Dr. Wilson mentioned, is to get students into school 5 days a week in person as soon as we can and do it safely. So this would allow students to attend every day. The schedule itself ends early. All the schedules end prior to lunch. In this particular model, in the hybrid model, students would be able to get a grab and go lunch, and Ms. Stubbs will talk a little bit more about that. We do have home transportation provided that we will continue to work on with buses. And keeping in mind that when we return to a full day of instruction in school, it's going to be done with the safety guidelines that are implemented by the Napa County Health. So we will have physical distancing, we will have hand washing, we will discuss face masks, potential shields, potential barriers for students and teachers as classroom design permits. So again, here's the in-person schedule. You could see all 3 of these models, whether it's 7 period or 8 periods, look very similar. So the transition between all 3 of the different models would be very seamless in a day. So it's not a complete change up of odd periods or even periods, or a complete disruption in a student day, that it should be able to go seamlessly on a moment's notice. If we were in person and had to go back to distance, we could do that very easily. So again, those schedules are available for you to look through a little bit further on our website if you need to. And I believe the next slide is for Ms. Stubbs.
Andy, you're on mute.
Sorry, I vowed not to do that today. Mr. Heller mentioned some of these things already, but across the district, we're working in every department to support reopening. And so, for example, we have purchased all the different safety equipment, personal protective equipment, and so forth that we need. That's outlined in the guidance. We've got masks for students. We have the barriers, hand washing stations, and so forth. We are preparing some family education learning modules and resources to help parents help students be successful at home. And our information technology crew is working hard to ensure that we've got robust internet access options available. We're purchasing additional Wi-Fi hotspots that have broader coverage, and we will be continuing our model of support to ensure that students and staff have what they need with regard to technology as we begin with distance learning. With food services, we will be continuing the distribution of breakfast and lunch meal kits while we are in distance learning. And currently that's on Mondays from 9:30 to 10:30 during the summer, and those dates, the day and time may change, but we'll notify parents in advance of that. For our students with special needs, we're making sure that they have the additional support that they need as outlined in their individual education plans. And we are in communication with the Boys and Girls Club to discuss what sorts of childcare options will be available for students.
Thank you, Andy, Chris, and Mary. So as a reminder, as required by state and local orders, we are currently in robust distance learning. And we have 2 options. One, for those families who the students will join us in person as soon as possible, and a virtual program that would last for the entire school year. Our first day of school is August 18th. We are asking for you to select that option 1 or 2 prior to or before on August 4th. That will allow us to begin to build classes for the district distance learning going into in-person as quickly as possible. As you can imagine, we are getting close here to the beginning of school. In the event that you take no action, you don't go online, you don't go onto the text and complete the form for making an option 1 or 2, you will be placed, your child will be placed in option 1, and we will incorporate them into our classes and scheduling. At this time, in just a moment, we will answer your questions. And in just a moment, Ms. Madrigal, I'll ask for you to assist the community in knowing how to do that. Prior to that piece, I do want to remind everyone that we do have a Q&A opportunity on our district website. It is a Google form, and you simply submit your question, and then between 24 and 48 hours, those questions are posted with responses. And so there is a series of many questions that have been asked since last week. And scrolling through that may answer some of your questions. And if not, then please submit your question. This is really hard. This is nothing that any of us ever planned for or believed would ever happen. This is my 34th or 35th year in education, and never did I think that I'd be faced with a pandemic. We're going to work really hard today to answer your questions, and we may have many of them. We may be able to answer them. We may not be able to answer some of them. And if we can't, we will tell you we don't know that answer. We will post the answer into that chart when we do have the answer. Things change every day, sometimes on the hour. So please understand, we're doing the very best we can given the information that we have at the moment. Ms. Madrigal, would you like to give instructions on how to ask questions?
Yes, if you care to ask a question of staff at this time, I ask if you are using Zoom on a desktop, on a laptop, or through the Zoom app. Hover towards the bottom of your screen and look for that hand icon. And if you go ahead and click on that hand icon, it will notify me of your question. If you are joining us via Zoom phone call, you dialed in, please use *9 to virtually raise your hand. I will go to the questions, and I will then allow you to speak, and then you may unmute your mic.
Thank you, Ms. Madrigal. Let's go ahead with the first question.
Yes, Carrie, you may go ahead and unmute your microphone and talk.
Thank you so much. With the phased approach, and I'm happy that that should be very short, what happens on their days off, first of all? Like, is there distance learning then, or are they just home? And can we choose which days they're there, just in case we're off certain days?
So Carrie, just to clarify, you're talking about the AB hybrid, if we move into AB hybrid?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Okay, Mr. Heller?
Yes, the AB hybrid, we are continuing to look at, as I said, these were approved in concept, so we are looking at how that delivery would occur for B students on Monday and Tuesday. If teachers would turn on a Zoom call, but there are concerns about monitoring a Zoom classroom and a live classroom at the same time. But if B students were not in that classroom and not a part of that period per se, they would be doing work individually that was related to their previous assignments. So more to come on that. We'll have more information down the line as our principals and our teachers return and begin to take a look at that. And I think, what was the second part of that question?
Is there input from parents? So for instance,
A and B.
I'm off on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So Monday, Tuesday, great. If my kid if I could be here when they're in school, that's where I want to be.
So that would be a counseling, scheduling issue once we got to that point. And then okay. I think that's something you connect directly with the counselor on to see how they can work on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Madrigal? You're on mute, Ms. Madrigal.
Rachel Williams, you're now allowed to talk. You may unmute your mic.
Okay, so my question for the 6th grade through 8th grade is related to the at-home, the robust distance learning right now. Will they be changing as they change classes, or will they be following that same daily schedule that they're going to adopt once it's like the hybrid, or is their schedule, is it kind of up to them to move through their work at their own pace as they're home completing their tasks, just so long as like they zoom in for their class time or whatever?
Right. So if I take your question, and as if I'm a student on Monday, I will attend period 1. My teacher will open with a Zoom call, and they could potentially have me on that Zoom call the entire time. They could have it for 30 minutes and say you have 10 minutes to work in a side room to work with this partner on something, or they could do it for 20 minutes and say work on this for 15 minutes and then check back in the final 5 minutes. So it does give some flexibility within that period, but they are accountable to that teacher for that time. Then they get the break, and then they continue on their classes subsequently. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Ms. Madrigal? And Ms. Madrigal, as you're turning on your microphone, please understand, participants, we will be calling on those of you that have a regular phone number and or you've listed a name, and that's just out of respect of the process and professionalism. So if you can go in and change your login to a phone number and or a name, and that will help us to know that you are here to ask us a question. Ms. Madrigal?
Laura, you may unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi there. I'm wondering if there have been some provisions made for families that have bandwidth problems and multiple children. I have 4 children, and the notion of Zoom all at the same time is not going to be physically possible.
Andy, do you want to address the notion of bandwidth and technology?
So in that particular case, we could probably issue an additional hotspot. And so 2 students in a family could be using one hotspot, for example, and the other 2 could be using the other one. In addition, there are Wi-Fi extenders that can extend the Wi-Fi into farther rooms to get a better signal in the other rooms. And that would be more for, quiet issues to promote quiet and things like that. So we'll be sharing with families some of these different technology support features as we get closer to the start of the school year.
Thank you.
Ms. Madrigal? You are on mute, Ms. Madrigal.
Denise, you may unmute your mic and ask your question.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I apologize if this was answered. I arrived about 8 minutes late. But I am high risk. So in our household, my 2 sons have to do distance learning the whole year. We had some questions about that, mainly if there is a vaccine and it is possible for kids to return safely to school, can my son switch to in-person? Or if we choose option 2 because we have to, will he be committed for the entire year regardless?
Mary, do you want to take that question?
Yes, I will. If they commit to option number 2, it is for a year, and Mr. Heller certainly can explain why we have to do that, because it has to do with logistical and class sizes. And in reference to if you are starting out, if we have a vaccine, our hope is to get every student back within the district into an in-person. So we absolutely would love to have that happen. We just don't know when that's going to happen, so we know it's a difficult decision. But if they choose virtual, it's for a year. If you choose in person and you are going along and all of a sudden you're just not comfortable with them being in person, we will, on a case-by-case basis, look at moving your son or daughter into a virtual environment.
Mr. Heller, you want to address the class size and logistics?
Sure. Denise, thanks for that question. The consideration of being in the virtual learning program for the year helps us identify students that we would not count on in the in-person model, so we can build our staffing and our class sizes on the physical constraints that they might have. Right now, our class sizes with the physical constraints of physical distancing have about a 5 to 6 foot distance between desks. And so if we built the class sizes for, let's say, 18, it would be difficult to reaccommodate students back in and move those class sizes up into the 20s without the clearance of a vaccine or, an all clear from Napa County Health to resume our normal daily, instruction in person in the safest manner possible. So I hope that kind of answers the why we're looking for parents to make a commitment by next Tuesday, so we can help build our master schedules with the students that we know are going to be in person. And then obviously if conditions change, we would want all students to be back in person in the safe manner that we can. So thank you for that question.
And Mary, could you elaborate on the idea that with the EdFuel virtual program, students will maintain enrollment in our district and we will be monitoring them through ARIES?
That is correct. So they'll be integrated in our system. They're still considered our student, and we want that to be the case. But they would just be doing the virtual environment. Everything will be provided by Fuel Education, and we will be able to see their grades at the end of the grading period, as well as look at their attendance. So you are considered part of our district. You are just in a totally separate program.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, if a family were to choose a different virtual program, they would be enrolling in that program and disenrolling in our school district.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. Ms. Madrigal, next question.
Yes, Andrea Robinson, you are now allowed to talk. Please unmute your mic.
Thank you. It's Andrea and John, so hopefully we can have one question each. My question was, actually, John, you can start with yours. Okay, my question was, if the in-person all clear happens prior to a parent being comfortable with the circumstances, what is the, and you're choosing option one, what is the provision for those a circumstance like that?
Chris or Mary?
Andrea, could you explain that one?
I apologize.
Yeah.
I apologize. So we choose option one, and then the in-person begins, and it's a date premature to what we feel comfortable with.
I see.
What's the implication?
Yeah, I think you would contact your site administrator to look into enrolling into the virtual program. As if I understand what you're saying, is that going back to school, you're just not comfortable still, there's no vaccine, and we're returning to school and you want to stay with that remote learning, we would have to look at enrolling you into that virtual learning program at that point, yes.
Okay.
I think just to flush that out just a little further, because we're trying to work through all these details as well, Andrea, is that we certainly would probably need to wait until each grading period to make that movement. So we wouldn't be able to move somebody in the middle of a grading period.
Yeah, a follow on to that, would there be an option to see how it's going for a week or two and see if it spikes? Because seeing how you're doing this is one thing. Seeing whether the kids, comport to it and it really works is another. And so if you choose option one and we think that the situation is being put back into a physical environment too prematurely, rather than do a student body left and go the other way, couldn't you be given like a couple of weeks to see if in fact it's spiking?
John, if I could respond to that just a bit, and then Mary and Chris, if you have something more you want to add to that. we understand exactly what you're saying, because if you look across the nation and you see where different shelter orders have been lifted and then the spread has occurred, it is a concern for us as well. And so when we presented these models to our board and talked about moving from distance learning to in-person, the hybrid model, while that is not our favorite model because we want students here every day, it also does provide us with a transition. And it's possible that although now we're talking with 612, it's possible that we would potentially bring our TK2 students back first. We would bring back everyone in that hybrid model so that we could move through. And as you said, we're talking about all of the different logistics that we have in place, and we've talked about it, and we've planned, and we've scenario planned, and we've ordered, and we have lots of materials to mitigate and stop the spread, and we need to see how it's going to work. So it's very possible that it would not be one day we're off of the list and the next day all in person come back. It will be a transition depending on where we are and what's happening with the disease at that time. Chris or Mary, any other piece around moving from in-person to virtual? Or John, any other aspect of your question that I didn't answer?
Well, asking it in the opposite direction, if one were to do the online and then, a vaccine happens or it's clear that there's no spike and everything's going well, obviously those people are going to really be bummed because they want their kids to have the complete social experience, et cetera. It seems a little extreme. I know you guys have to know that. You have to have thought about it yourself. I get the logic around planning. I totally do. At the same time, if somehow, manna falls from heaven and we get a good situation here, the idea that, well, you have decided you will stay, that nobody likes that, right? So I've understood that you might be able to come back in. It's pretty amorphous, but the question is why, in light of the fact that that could happen, why do we have two different online courses? Why wouldn't we have had one such that when you then reintegrate, you're exactly in line? Plus, it seems like it would have been an efficiency thing. I mean, why pay for two? You see what I'm saying? Why wouldn't there be one online thing?
John, I get what you're saying, and we absolutely have parents that have told us via the surveys that they are very hesitant to send their child to school at any time in this school year. And we felt compelled to offer the two different options. And so that's the why. Chris, Mary, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think John's question centers in like the aspect of why not having an independent study teacher from St. Helena High School or RLS, manage this. And that really lies in the idea, the concept that we need every available staff member to, lower our class sizes to where we can bring students back faster. So if we took a teacher, an English teacher, and said, you're our independent studies teacher, there's 90 to 120 students we would have to account for in the schedule. And we were trying to do the opposite, is have more staffing available to provide more sections to reduce the numbers that are in the class. So that's why we ended up having to choose a different option other than our own available staff.
And so the online option that's in option one simply is not doable without faculty from the school. In other words, my point was, couldn't we have one online option? Why is there fuel plus the other, such that all the kids, are, whether they're at home or at school, they're getting the same curriculum, the same, you see what I'm saying? And a different question is, do you have the staffing to do both? The question about, do you see what I'm saying? Is why couldn't the online course be the same? Why have two different courses?
I do. I think I understand what you're saying. I think it's more of a logistical thing than we probably have time for. So I can talk to you about that, one-on-one at another time.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's just a little more in depth, and I just want to make sure that we get through all the other questions today. But I'll be happy to answer that with you at another time.
And to lower the class size to the point where we can have all of our students in person, we do need all of our teachers. We don't have a handful of extra teachers that would be available to continue in that online environment for the entire school year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Madrigal, next question.
Yes, Suzanne, I am going to allow you to talk. Please unmute your mic.
Good evening, everyone. My question for my son is going into 6th grade, and when I'm looking at the full year virtual program, it's saying that there will be 5 classes, one of them being a foreign language. And then when we look at the breakdown for the online to then become in class, that is showing 7 to 8 classes. So is there a chance you can speak to what curriculum will be covered if they're doing the distance learning to then be able to come on site? Because we're missing about 2 to 3 classes if you look at the numbers between the 2 different types of learning.
Mary, you want to address our graduation requirements and the format of our schedules and why we opted for the difference?
Absolutely. So what we're trying to do is give the absolute core classes that need to be provided per grade level in order to stay with the state of California graduation requirement credit allotment, which is 180. We require 225 credits in St. Helena for graduation. So if a student is opting to go with the virtual learning, we are just staying with the bare minimum of what they need to move from grade level to grade level in order to receive a high school graduation diploma from St. Helena Unified. So we're modifying how many credits they need. And we can do this. We have the capability of waiving this for 1 year and bringing the students back after the online virtual program.
Thanks for that explanation, Mary. Does that also mean that if the class sizes will support it, that the children can look forward to possibly still having some electives? Is that what we're looking at if we're in addition to just the usual ELA, math, and what?
There would be no electives at the middle school level for 6th through 8th grade. You would have foreign language, so you're getting your core classes that you need. At the high school level, this is based on what you would need working with your counselor. So some students, if they've received the 2 years of foreign language and they don't need it, then that's where the counselors come in and say, what do they need to keep on track with those 180 credits for California graduation requirements. So,
and Mary, you're speaking of the virtual program right now, not the distance learning moving to in-person, correct?
That's correct. Sorry about that, Mary Lou. Yes,
that's okay.
Correct.
And so, Mr. Heller, for the distance moving to in-person, where there's either 7 or 8 periods, the elective question stands from Suzanne. What would their schedule look like of distance learning with those 7 or 8 periods?
The schedule that a student starts with in distance learning, as they're scheduled in 7 periods, would translate and move seamlessly to the hybrid model and to the in-person model. So they're all very similar. I believe periods 1 through 4 are Monday and Thursday, and periods 5 through 7 and or 5 through 8 are on Tuesday and Friday. So the design of the schedule allowed, even though the times are a little different, students can still have that consistency of knowing the periods on those particular days. So the schedules would remain the same.
And Mary Lou, they would have electives if they were in our phased approach in reference to in-person or distance, they would have electives.
Thank you. Ms. Madrigal, next question.
Adam, please unmute your mic so you're allowed to talk.
Adam, you're still muted.
There we go. Try that again. If we select the phased instruction option 1, during the distance learning piece that we start out with, will it be the same teachers that are teaching our students in distance learning as it will be when they get back to in-person learning? So that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, assuming it's sort of like we're doing right now, a Zoom meeting kind of format, Will there be a chance for our students to have one-on-one coaching if they come up against a question that they need help with, or a concept they need help with? And then, completing homework, will the teacher be able to provide one-on-one feedback or group feedback to the students? And then the third part of my question is, will there be actual letter grades issued this year? Thank you.
Yes, Adam. Mr. Heller?
Well, succinctly, yes, yes, yes. But let me, the first question I believe was, will the teachers translate from distance learning through hybrid? There would be no changes in teachers once they're scheduled, so that would translate through all three models. That's a good question. The one-on-one support, I believe, it will be delivered through access. So wherever you see access time in the schedules, that's opportunities for the teachers to either work individually with students or with small groups, so the teachers are available to help during that time. And the letter grades, yes, with the return of our schedules and a different model in our remote learning, we're moving forward with grades and assessment. The question about homework is a little tricky because students are at home, so there's really nothing to take home to reinforce the school day, right? So it might just be the continuance of whatever activities they were doing in that period. And so teachers will redesign their syllabi and their expectations for grading to adjust to whatever assignments that they're assigning during the school year. So great three-part question.
And I think Mr. Heller, he also asked, would there be letter grades?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Ms. Madrigal?
Carl, you're now allowed to talk, so please go ahead and unmute your mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Is zero period just going to take place in 8th period? And also, how is PE going to be handled?
Mr. Heller, zero period and PE.
Carl, two unknowns at this point, so more to come, but I know who you are, Carl, so that's a good question.
All right.
I'll get
Carl,
back to you on that.
Will you submit those questions online in the Q&A on the district website?
I'll try to find it.
It's very easy to find. Just open the district website and go to Q&A. Really easy.
All
Ms.
right. All right.
Thank you. Ms. Madrigal?
Nigel, you're now allowed to talk. Please unmute your mic.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Hey, Chris, I think this question is really for you and kind of follows on from John's earlier question. But from my discussions with other families and speaking specific to our family's position, I wonder whether there's a significant segment of the population that hasn't been considered in the determinations, and therefore the two choices offered maybe don't work for all families. My sense is that many parents I know are heavily leaning towards the virtual classroom because they feel it's the right choice for their child's education. They're not leaning that way because they're uncomfortable sending their kids back to school during a pandemic, as has been repeatedly stated. So I think many parents feel like they're forced to choose the distance learning option simply because they can't return to in-person classes when they do become available. So my question really is, why haven't we canvassed the parents to ask how many would like to start with the virtual classroom with the FuelEd platform, but move back to in-person classes when available? And therefore just include this in your data, this data for your planning purposes, so that we do have that option to start with the virtual platform, but return when the classes do fire up again.
I want to answer your question. I think what you're saying is just the ability to be in distance learning, and then maybe I'm just missing it. Can you just succinctly ask that for me?
Yeah. I mean, I understand that you've said that if you choose the virtual platform, that you cannot return to in-person classes.
Yeah, right.
For planning purposes, and I totally get that. But from a planning standpoint, why not ask the parent body how many want to start with the FuelEd, the virtual platform, but move back to in-person classes as soon as they're available, and just plan for that accordingly?
Chris, could you talk to the survey that you conducted?
Right. The survey that I initially conducted had a 40% response rate of wanting to be all online. And I know conditions change. So we could put out a survey at any week along the summer and probably get different data. But that, if I took 40% of TK-12 and thinking about that, that's quite a number. So we wanted to pursue an online option that would make parents feel comfortable. But then we also have to, I think, the central part of your question really centers on the ability to come back when it's feels right for each family, and we want to have that, but I also have to design classes and class sizes that are socially distant, or not socially, physically distant in manners where seats and class design are maximized to include student enrollment, and it's a lot more challenging than it might appear. But when we're trying to get class sizes at 18 and thinking about different electives and the concept of having substitutes and like all these different logistics that go into the day, it's really a challenge to just feel like when we're back in school that everybody can come back. That's just not feasible, and it would make us revert to a hybrid model, which we really want to try to use as a gap between full person instruction and distance learning, but not as our learning model for the year. So your other question kind of centered on polling the parents a little bit more. I'm not sure what additional information I haven't received unless it's a part of what our next steps are in terms of gathering how many parents are actually going to choose that option. And we really don't want it to be for a year. I mean, in a perfect world, we want all students to be back in school as soon as possible. But from a planning purpose, and maybe your question makes it seem like it's not punitive anyway for the district. It's just we just need to plan on how many people want to be in person as soon as possible.
Yeah, I guess my statement or question is, how many of those people that said no, they don't want to return, said so because they were disenchanted with the distance learning at the end of last year, and therefore would rather stay virtual because it was better for their kids. But as soon as in-person classes fire up, they'd rather be there. So yeah, that's really where I'm coming from. I mean, from our perspective, we feel that our kids are better off in that virtual platform because we feel we can manage that better and manage their education better. But our second option after that was, once schools have fired back up, is to get them back in the classroom. It's not to be online for the remainder of the year. So I just wonder how many folks have said, no, we don't want to come back, not because of the pandemic, but because they're not really comfortable with the distance learning that's being offered, or it doesn't fit with their family lifestyle or the work schedule of the parents and so forth.
We've gotten feedback, a handful of comments via email along those lines. But generally speaking, that our last year's distance learning was spring 2020 1.0, and I feel like as we launch 2.0 here in the fall, it's going to be a very different model, and our teachers are better prepared to handle that, and they kind of know where our roadmap is to provide better distance learning with a prescribed schedule. So I just feel like it's going to be better. But I mean, I respect your decision and your choice as a parent too. So
yeah,
know that we're here to work with you. So as questions come up along, like, can we return? If there's space available, I'd love to have as many students available coming back to in-person instruction as soon as possible.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I know that
we have more people waiting for
for
questions, and so if you two want to discuss more offline, please do. Ms. Madrigal?
Yes, Steve, you are allowed to talk. Please unmute your mic.
Hello, this is Christina Barnfield, Steve's wife. You can hear me?
Yes.
Correct. Okay, so obviously this is a very difficult choice. We're highly considering the Fuel Ed option, but to be honest, I feel like I'm comparing apples to nothing because the Fuel Ed website seems to be geared towards institutions like yourself as a parent to go on there and really try to understand what the curriculum is beyond math or English, and how that virtual learning would take place. I don't understand if they're interacting with the same teacher for every class? If they have in-person or, let's say screen time, like we're doing now, is it a Zoom class? Are they just getting, I don't, blah,
Christine,
blah,
I understand. Yeah, I understand your questions. And Mary, would you share a little bit of information around what you're going to post in the Q&A chart?
Absolutely. So that question was brought up at the lower grades as well. And I realize that the site that you have is more business oriented, so you get a kind of an overview of what the program and business is like. But there's a parent portal, so to speak, on the day in the life of a student. So I'm going to put several links on the Q&A page so parents can go in to see what a day in the life of a student is. It is personalized learning, so you are one-to-one personalized learning. Your child is with a teacher. Now, in reference to do they have a different teacher for each subject matter, I don't have that answer at this time, but I'll certainly put that on the website Q&A as well once I find out. But it is personalized learning. It is one-to-one. It's based on assessment, and they will get the core classes in that virtual environment.
Yes, but I feel very rushed to make this very important decision. You're offering us an option with very, very little information. And I appreciate that you will get us that on the Q&A, but I'm not sure that's enough information for me to base a full year of academics on when I can't come back. My student can't come back. Yeah, I'm afraid to commit to that option with so little information.
I think that those links that Mary adds to the Q&A will definitely add more information to your decision-making process. And we understand that this is challenging and difficult, and all of us feel a little bit on the rushed side. July 17th was not a day that any of us were happy about. We were planning for in-person instruction, and and that changed, pretty dramatically, which really caused us to have to shift our thinking. So, Mary, anything else you'd like to say about the virtual program?
I think I just want to put out there that it was well vetted in reference to looking at the research behind it. It's been around for many, many, many years. It's well respected, and it's utilized by several districts. So it has a great reputation, and there's a lot of awards that this particular program has received.
Okay,
Thank you, Mary.
And a very, very quick follow-up question. Is there any possible way, if we opted for in-person, option one, and we were really not comfortable coming back, that they could continue online with the same teachers? I know it's like asking for the moon, but like,
I know it's
just
hard because then
put a camera, like, can't they record the lesson in person and they just continue to follow along at home?
I don't think so, but
it's possible though. You could do it, maybe.
Anything's possible. I would say no at this point, but I'll review that.
Think about that. That
Okay.
might be good.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Just an awareness for everyone, it is, we're coming up on the 5 o'clock hour. I know that there are many of you that have your hands still raised if your questions are not answered. We do ask that you post them in the Q&A on the district website. Ms. Madrigal, we will go right up to 5 o'clock, so go ahead and give us another question.
Yes, Laura, you are now allowed to talk. Please unmute your mic.
Hi, everybody. I had a question regarding the virtual learning platform as well. I appreciate, Christine's concern as well, just not having a lot of information about it. So and I look forward, Mary, to your, posting on the Q&A page. One question I had is, when you say one-to-one, my understanding with the fueled education was that there is not a live teacher, that basically like 1.0 kids just doing sort of their core curriculum at their own pace. It's personalized. Yes, I've explored the whole website and seen all the courses, but can you confirm, is there a live teacher? And when you say one-to-one, I guess I'm just more curious what that really means.
They do have a learning coach that is assigned, that is working, a credentialed teacher that is working with the students. So there will be some live interaction with a credentialed teacher.
Okay. And then do they also Zoom with other kids? I know there's a lot of people nationwide on that platform. I think it's like 600,000 or something that across the nation are part of that whole system. Do they interact with other students, or is it pretty much their relationship with that virtual coach or that one teacher that you're talking about?
It's, from my understanding, Laura, it's personalized learning and it's one-to-one. So they're not in a group setting or a small group setting. They're one-to-one with a coach.
Okay. And then just one last follow-up is if we do select the virtual option 2, I heard someone ask about electives. Was that ruled out, that students could no longer participate in an elective, say, that was being taught virtually during that time?
Yeah, I understand. I think I understand your question, Laura. If they're at the high school level, they'll be working with the counselor to see what credits they need. And so there's A through G requirements. So if they needed some electives based on the 6 classes that they're offered, then they would work with their counselor to see what that elective would be for the online course.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Laura. I just want to take everyone again to sharing my screen and to show you this is the district website. And when you open it up, there is the Vintage Hall building. If you scroll down and go to the Q&A, this is the place where you can click and submit a question and simply type the school if you'd like. You don't have to, and then share your question. And then once we have those questions, we then post them, and you can see that questions were submitted yesterday and they've been posted today. And I'm just scrolling to show you that there are lots of questions answered already. And we're working really hard to make that, within 24, if not 48 hours. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. And I know some of you didn't get your questions answered, so please post them to the Q&A. This is a very difficult, challenging time, and we know that it's difficult and challenging for us. And I know that it's hard and difficult for you. Take good care, and thank you for joining us this evening.